So welcome. Just want to thank everyone for coming. This has been kind of a crazy conference to set up. It's kind of a funny story. We kind of didn't intend to actually put on a conference. It kind of came out naturally. We invited some of our Chicago developers to come up for a talk that we were going to have here, and people were like, hey, if everyone's going to come into town, we should do a front-end developer conference. And the idea was kind of like, really? We could do that? And then it sort of snowballed into, yeah, that'd be awesome. So let's totally do it. So here it is. We think we put together like an awesome lineup of speakers. So it should be really fun. I thank everyone for coming out. A couple of sort of housekeeping items. Bathroom's just kind of out the hall, straight to your left. There's food and drinks and stuff will be kind of in the kitchen throughout the day. Feel free to help yourself to anything in the fridge. I want to thank Peter Cooper that runs HTML5 Weekly. It's an awesome newsletter. If you guys aren't on it yet, you should definitely sign up. It's easily the best source of information for HTML5 and stuff like that, and he really helped us kind of spread the word. Gave us a line item in his newsletter one week. That was awesome. And then lastly, I just want to thank Groupon for kind of making this all possible. It's kind of an idea that just a couple of our developers here had, and Groupon let us run with it. Helped us make it free and provide everything that you guys will enjoy today. So that's it. So just thanks for coming. Without further ado, we'll just get started with the first talk, which is Peter Bergström. We'll be talking about Ember Js.
Hey guys, let me just get this on. All right, so yeah, my name is Peter Bergström, and I'm the engineering lead for Groupon Scheduler, and I'm here to talk about Ember Js in the wild. So I've been doing Ember Js for Groupon Scheduler for probably about 6 months, but I've been doing client-side MVC for a long time. So a little bit of background about myself. I've been doing client-side MVC apps for 5 some years now. I worked at Apple using SproutCore before it was actually called SproutCore, really. So I've seen the evolution of what Ember JS evolved from the beginning. So I worked on .Mac, MobileMe, and iCloud apps. And the last thing I did was actually architect the MobileMe iCloud calendar client using SproutCore. But 18 months ago, I left Apple for a startup called Strobe that worked on an HTML5 platform, I would probably call it. It was founded by Charles Jolly, who was the creator of SproutCore. Ember JS started as a little internal project called SproutCore 2.0. Basically, the idea was that SproutCore has a lot of really cool things, but you don't want to download 1.5 meg of JavaScript onto your client before you have to use it. So basically, the idea was to come up with a more lightweight framework that has the ideas of SproutCore, and then make that into something that's very good for mobile devices. So that was started at Strobe by Yehuda Katz, Tom Dale, and Peter Wagenet. Those guys left Strobe. I left Strobe to go to Groupon, and here I am. So what is Ember JS? Who's familiar with Ember? So let's see people from my team because we're working on Ember apps and some other ones. So essentially, it's a JavaScript framework for creating. This is from this is actually from their website. A quote. Ember is a JavaScript framework for creating ambitious web applications that eliminates boilerplate and provides a standard application architecture. So, and I'm sure people will ask a little bit about like the difference between Ember and Backbone and all that stuff. Ember is a little bit more, it provides more architecture. It's bigger, it's not a micro framework. It's, it's like 300K before it's compressed. So it's a lot bigger. It offers a lot of more features and all that stuff. But I think that's actually a good thing. So I'm kind of on the camp of providing more than less. So what does Ember do to deliver on the promise of being an ambitious framework? Well, these are the things that I actually get really excited about. Handlebar templates, data bindings and property observing, computer properties, and state management. I think state management is probably the biggest thing that I'm excited about, and I'll go into detail about that later. So handlebar templates. Anyone familiar with this? Excellent. So the spin that Ember takes on mustache tags and all that stuff is, I don't know if it's necessarily unique, but I really like it. So in this case, I have a person, myself. I have a first name and a last name. And you can basically just have in your index file, you just have a script tag, and you can just add mustache tags in there. The thing that's nice about it is that these are all bound properties, so when I change my first name here, it'll automatically update the template. So that's kind of the basics of handlebars, but you can do a lot more with it. So one of the things you can do conditionals, also based on computer properties. So like, if I have an object, I want to toggle if I'm percenter or not, this will automatically update the template without any more work I have to do. One thing that I use a lot in my applications, for example, is looping. So if I have an array of people, it's very easy to just loop over it and have a list of people without a lot of work. The other couple of things here, attribute bindings. So one of the things I have in my model, and I'll go into an app in more detail, is that I have like map URLs. So here I want to bind to it. So like I have my model, I have a map URL. It's easy just to bind the source here without any additional overhead. However, if my map doesn't change very often, I could use this unbound property and just have it be printed out on the screen essentially, and then I don't have to touch it later. The last thing, this actually is changed. Before they were using, they had a button view for actions. Now they just have it an inline tag where you can just provide an action, I guess this is the action, and a target. So here it's target to my state chart. So that's another way to add interactivity to your app without a lot of work. The other thing is that, and I don't really know how to explain this or approach it because there's so many different ways to do it, is all these things are just markup, right? But sometimes you want more advanced views. So like one of the things you can do is you can actually have views just defined in line, so you have a view with stuff inside of it. Or you can have your first template. I do this a lot because sometimes my templates can be really, really big, and I don't want to have one template that's 500 lines long. So I want to break it out into multiple templates. And one way to do that is just have a template name and then have a secondary template. And then if you really want to get custom, you can actually extend Ember view and create a new view, and then you can put whatever you want in there for really custom stuff. So that's the real basics of handlebars. And with this, you can probably write 90% of Ember apps with this information. So, okay, data bindings and property observing. I know that other frameworks have data bindings and property observing as well, but this is kind of the Sprout Core Ember way, and I've been doing it for so long, so this is second nature. But one of the things is that it provides glue between your model, controller, and view with a minimal markup. You can do this in Handlebar Templates or any arbitrary Ember object. So if you want a binding from your model, well, not your model, but your controller to a view or something like that, it's very, very simple to do. And then observers just automatically detect the changes and trigger notifications in your application. And I guess, again, I actually touched on it earlier, is that Handlebar template properties are bound by default. You can make them unbound if you want to for performance reasons. There's no point in making something a live binding if you're not actually going to use it. So this is how you do a binding or a handlebars template. Basically, There's a keyword here, binding. So this is the property name, binding, and the path. And then anything inside of there, we'll just pick it up, like a local property to the view. Same thing here. This is a view, but it could be any object. Just foo binding, app path to foo. So that is the gist of that. The next thing is property, just basically property observing. It's very, very simple. Like this is something that you see a lot. Is you have a binding, and then you want to act some, in your view, for example, if you want to set a visible binding based on some properties, you can actually just do this. So you have an observer, foo did change, and then you just add the dot observes here for foo, and then it automatically, yeah?
Stupid newbie question.
Sure.
On previous slides, you have script type text / handlebars.
Yeah.
And on a previous / x handlebars, x dash handlebars.
Oh, that might just be a typo.
Okay. Which
Yeah.
one is the?
I think it's, hold on, let me go back. Yes, that's the right one. Yeah, just typo. So let me see here. Yeah, so that's how simple a observer is. And I mean, in this case, I could have just bound this property directly to is visible. So I could have is visible binding this. But if you want to have some more complex logic in there, it's great to just have an observer defined like that. One note about bindings and observers is that you need to use the get and set properties or functions. So any object using that's extended from Ember object has .get and .set. So if I want to get a property, I use that. If I want to set a property, I use that. And the reason why I want to use that is while I can always just, if I have my view or my object, I can just .foo. That works. But if it's a binding, I'll just get the binding from there. Won't actually get the real property. So that's why you want to use get, because it actually resolves that for you. So the other thing is that if you have, this is something that's this is new for Ember, is that, in Ember I should say, is that you can actually also use it on arbitrary hashes. So when I worked at Strobe, one of the projects I did was I was doing a project for eBay to do a touch app for their site. So basically, actually optimized for iPad. And one of the things that we ended up having problems with was that we wanted to optimize our JSON response and then display it. And we didn't want to load up all these, we load up the hash, we create an object to make it nice, and we can use get and set on it in our handlebar templates. So basically, instead, we kind of push to just have, so we could do it on any hash. So it's a lot easier, and you have to do less work in the end. You can also use some other nice things. You can do get path. So this is pretty safe. So one of the things that I always see new people doing is that they do app.get something, .get something, .get something. If anything is null in that chain, things will blow up. So doing get path, it's a safe way to do it, and you don't have to show. If anything in path to bar is undefined, we just return undefined without exploding. You can also use set path if you want to do that. Next thing, computer properties. So computer properties is basically a way to have more complex logic, but it's actually fronted as a normal property. So I could do a relatively complex operation, pulling different properties and combining that into one arbitrary property that is exposed to my, for example, my view as one property. It's pretty nice. Then, and I'll actually go to the next slide, you can invalidate. So for example, I'm just going to skip. So here I have a string property. My string property, and I'm going to reverse it. So basically, when this changes, this function will invalidate and actually run this again. So if I don't do that, so let's say that this doesn't change and I call this function 1,000 times, the first time it'll run it, every single time after that it'll actually just pull the computer property without actually having to look at, have to run this function. So using caching is or property invalidation and caching is very nice. So you don't have to, if you have something that is very expensive to run, you can just run it once and be done with it. One note is that cacheable is actually going to go away in future versions of Ember. You need it now if you're like using 0.9.8, I think, but it's going to go away in 1.0, which is happening soon. All right. The next thing is state charts. Who's familiar with state charts? Who's familiar with using state charts for apps? Guy in the back and those two. All right. Why use state charts? Like interactive apps contain a lot of state, and one trap that I've seen is that people start managing state by having a little variable here, a variable there. It's like my modal is open, yes, all that stuff, or look at class names or something like that. It's very hard to manage. State charts makes this a lot more well-defined. Basically, it allows you one centralized place to manage all the state for your application. Well, state chart. And the other thing that's really nice is that when you're in a specific state and you have an action in your app, it'll only get handled if it's defined as an action in that state. Otherwise, it'll just bubble up and get dropped on the floor if it's not actually valid. So here is a very, very basic state chart. So I have two states. I have loading, and loaded. So like, for example, this is a very simple things. Like let's say I have a list and I want to, I'm viewing the list and I'm scrolling down and there's like a load more or something like that. Basically, this cycle. So I have loading. So when I'm done loading, I send an event called didLoadData that then transfers over to the loaded state or transitions to a loaded state. Then I have an action in the loaded state called loadMore that then pushes it back into or transitions into loading. So basically, it's very simple. But how do you actually do this in Ember? Well, it's actually pretty simple. So Ember has a state chart manager. That's your top-level state chart. And you can define an initial state. And I have two states. Two states, loading and loaded. In my enter function here, I just call something in my app, very simple. I just app.load, just loads data. For this example, it doesn't really matter. And then I have a loaded state that just sits there. Let's say that the data is bound from the model, you don't have to worry about it in this case. Then I have two actions. I have didLoadData and loadMore. So when I'm in here, and I do, I actually didn't show an example of this, but I could do app.stateChart, send, didLoadData, and with a response or any, depending on how you set your state chart up. Then it'll actually call this function, try to transition to the loaded state, and then vice versa. So basically, kind of, the nice thing is that let's say that you're in the loading state, and someone sends loadMore, they'll just get dropped on the floor because you're not in the right state. So that's really nice because, first of all, you can have UI buttons that either are active or inactive, but they don't actually trigger anything if I'm not in the right state. So like one of the things I do in the app I'm going to go over a lot is I have a back button. They're all send the same action, back. But as I'm going through the application, if I click back, it knows which state I'm in, and then it transfers over to the next state, which basically just does a transition to just like here. And then I can just keep hitting back. The button's generic. It just has a generic action called back. And I don't have to care about where I am.
How do you bind the button state to different application states?
Doesn't matter. So let me go back, because this is actually a good point. All I do there it is. Action, open, and it's like back, app state chart. So basically, then you can do a binding. So is visible. So I can have a property that I set when I enter into the specific state that just says hide this button. So I can have a controller with a property saying like show button or something like that, and you just turn it off.
Folks say
Let me see if I can think.
Someone that's smart enough to know what to do when the application.
Oh, right. But the nice thing is that the button shouldn't care, right? The state chart cares. So it responds to the event that it needs to do. So like here, I have an open button. I can have 10 states with open actions that do all different things. Depending on which state I'm in, it'll do the right thing. I'll show an example. Let's see here. All right, and I'll show an example. So let me show you an app that I've actually written using Ember. So this is Groupon Scheduler's mobile booking app. Basically, it allows customers who bought a Groupon to book their appointment online. So let's say that you, I don't know, a massage or actually a high five with Simon. I bought a high five with Simon and I want to book it. You can basically use this application to book that. And let me show you how this works. I'm switching between. So there are two ways to do this. The first way, actually I'm going to show you here, is that the business here is called Acme Handshakes. And I can book online. So basically, that is really, really hard to see. Sorry. You can basically just go through and, so a handshake, you can pick your time, enter your information, and now I've booked an appointment. So it actually shows up in the merchant schedule as an appointment. I get a confirmation email and all that stuff. But let's say that I'm on a mobile device. So this is the desktop experience. But if I'm on a mobile device and I'm on the same page here, that other one is not very optimized. So this is the application right here. Same data, but in a mobile UI. So I can go through the steps here. Go through, figure out what time I want, all that stuff. Go right here, enter my contact info. And confirm my appointment. So same thing, but in a mobile experience, and that's all written in Ember. But the thing that's relatively new is you can also do it via the native app. So this is the Groupon Native App, and I bought my Acme Handshake. I can actually just go in, hopefully it'll work, there you go, and book in a seamless experience. So this is Ember Js running in a native wrapper. The rest of the app is native, but I can go and book, and if I don't want to do this, I can just easily transition back to the native app. So I'm going to get a low 5. And here I can pre-fill information because I know who you are. So I need to enter my phone number and confirm my appointment. And then I can just press done. And if I go back here, now it should say, now it actually says that I've actually done a booking and it's confirmed. So that's the gist of the application right here. Yeah?
Mobile devices, does Ember JS use local storage?
It can. I'm not. Basically, because here the information needs to be as up to date as possible. So I just fetch it every single time when I need it. But there is a data store for Ember that I think evolved from the Sprocker data store that's pretty advanced, but a little bit more lighter weight. So you can do a lot of really neat things with it. But I'm not using it here because I don't need it. Okay. So let me go back here. So for example, like one of the things that you were asking about like responding to back events. So if I'm going right here, you see that I have a back button right here. In the code, the button just says sends back, and now it sends back. But I'm in different states, so it knows which back to do. So that's the nice thing about a state chart. So I'm going to go back to the presentation here. And I just want to go over this. This is the very high-level state chart for the application. I'm not going to go into code right here because it's kind of verbose, but basically it has 3 major states. 1, loading. If it's a bookable deal, it's bookable. And if it's already booked, I switch over to this little state that just shows the confirmation screen that you saw like when I'm done with the booking. So, okay, so the first thing is the loading state. Basically, so you saw 2 modes that the application is running. One is that I'm on a merchant's website. I just click book, and then, oh, that's a typo. Then the other one is there is directly from Groupon, so inside of like the native app, for example. So basically, I get different state. I need to get different information. Here, I need to load, deal information and all that stuff. From here, I don't need to do any of that. So basically, it just makes a choice. If it actually says that I've already booked this, it just goes to the book state immediately and says, congratulations, you have a booking. You made a booking already. You want to change it. Then the next thing is this guy. So this is really where all the booking happens. So there's a couple of decisions that are made here in the locations. First, if I only one location, I don't need to show it, so you just skip the services. If I click in the list of locations and I click and I select a location, it just automatically forwards you here because you made one decision already, and then it narrows down your search. And then, like I showed earlier, everything has a back event. It just goes back to the previous state. So again, selecting services, selecting time slots. Time slots is pretty complicated. I showed like there was like a little mini calendar to slide it down. You can do a lot of, you can navigate months, you can get more data and all that stuff. I'm not going to show that because it's kind of complicated, but if you have any questions. And then entering your details. When I'm done, I do a save action, call the server, do a save, and then I go back to booked. Yeah? No. Make it real? No, I mean, this is our own booking app. So probably wouldn't be too useful for you. So anyway, so that's a high-level state chart. So a little bit about developer tools. Sprockware had a ginormous build tool library that was pretty hefty. Ember doesn't. So like when you start using Ember, you can kind of get lost. So like you get some boilerplate HTML and some JavaScript. One problem that I have is that I want to have a nice hierarchy of my files. And I want to have a controllers directory, models directory, views, and subdirectories like that. One problem is if I just add 20 different script tags in my index, it's kind of complicated and will load slow and all that stuff too. So there's this thing called Rake Pipeline by Living Social that actually Yehuda and Tom, who work on Ember, have worked with them. Basically, it's just a little thing. You can define your assets, and you can just, for example, I have an asset file that says, in my app directory, get everything that's a JavaScript file, combine it into one file for me when I run this script, when I run Rake Pipeline. Same thing with CSS. So I have one file. I can also set like inclusion order and all that stuff, which is really nice. I can show this to you guys if you want to. One thing is that want to detect your changes and all that stuff. There is a watch here that starts a server, but for our architecture we use PHP. I actually just came up with like a custom script that monitors everything, and when it detects a change, it just runs RakeP for me. And then I use Jasmine for testing as well. And some resources. Emberjs.com. Obviously, I think some guys probably check this out. GitHub has all the code on there, has good examples and all that stuff. If you want to try Rake Pipeline, it's also on GitHub. And one of the best resources is probably to go to Ember Js on Freenode if you have any questions and all that stuff. I'm in that chat room pretty often as well, so if you guys have any questions. All right. Questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Have you ever tested the memory usage between
Have I ever tested memory usage between Ember and Backbone? I have not, but I'm pretty memory conscious. So like one of the examples or the stuff that I've done with Sproutcore was, at Apple, we wrote a calendaring app that was pretty comparable to like iCal in functionality on the web. And one of the things there was that I figured out a lot of memory issues there. So I try to be as memory conscious as possible. One of the things, like for example, that is nice about doing an Ember app is that it's easy to set up your bindings, your objects, and all that stuff. It's really quick and easy. But then you may have to go back and make sure that do I need to bind this property, for example? Maybe I should use that as an unbound because it never changes. Stuff like that. So it's easy to run away, but as long as you're careful, it's actually pretty good. In the back.
What other templating systems would you recommend?
That's a good question. I've actually really only used this templating system. With Sproutcore, for example, they don't really use, I used handlebars as well. And most of the stuff, unfortunately, in Sproutcore previously was all like you write your own HTML, or you have a function that outputs HTML as strings. So that's not necessarily the best thing. But templating is definitely the way to go.
Yeah, so the size of the actual library seems kind of high. Are you actually bundling the code as part of the native app when it's distributed, or are you actually downloading over the wire?
Right now we're downloading over the wire, but when it's gzipped, it's pretty small.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know if there's any plans to actually break it up into smaller pieces? So that
You can do that. You can actually do that. Right now, I'm not doing that, but it's definitely relatively easy to do. They have a lot of packages, so you can add and remove things as you go along. You can make it a lot smaller if you need to. Like the core of Ember provides a lot of stuff that Backbone does, if not comparable, and it's really small. But then, if you want to have views and you want to have state charts and all that stuff, which are nice to have, then it's, it does add up. But I think the benefits of it is higher than the negatives, because you end up writing less code yourself. So it's kind of, a wash in some ways, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry for the beginner question, but do you normally use handlebars in addition to the normal templating you have in your app, like Rails, HTML, these files, or do you just use handlebars?
So I can actually show you what I do here. So we're not Rails based, but one of the things that we do, so we actually use PHP, and here is I'm going to find a simple example. So for example, here's my locations. This is really hard to read. I'm sorry. Let me font bigger. Why is that not working? There it is. Can you guys see that? Can you see that? Okay. Basically, and of course my scroll position completely changed. This is the handlebars template. One of the things that I do is we do localization, which is just PHP. So instead of doing it in JavaScript, which you can, I just output it on the screen right here because there's no reason to waste JavaScript cycles to do localization. So it actually is pretty simple. So we're using a combination of like PHP for this stuff, but you can use Rails or any backend you want.
So how does the data binding work? As in, does it render the template each time when you
No. What it actually does, and let me. This I can't make bigger, but so for example, this is a service. This property, right? Yeah, I know. It's just that's true. So here, for example, I used unbound, so just printed it out, right? But if I want to have something that's a bound property, I want to see a brown property that actually has something. So give me a second here. Actually, I'm using unbound for most of these things. But one of the things here is I can, it actually adds a little script tag to figure out where it is. So basically, you'll only change that part of your template. It won't change the entire thing. So if you change one property, it'll only touch one part of the DOM, which is nice.
Could you explain the use of script tags as placeholders?
That's just internal bookkeeping for Ember. So basically, since I switch everything over to Unbound, it's a little hard to explain. But basically, it just says that your code is going to go inside of this block. So actually, I believe that these are actually if statements right here. So it says that'll actually be an if statement. And then if that thing, it'll put stuff in there. Does that make sense?
Sort of. So I'm trying to.
So basically, internally at Ember, they have some, well, it's a placeholder that basically has, this is a block, and if the block is true in their internal logic, it'll output stuff in between these tags. That's it.
Can I add a comment to that? The reason I chose to use script tags to kind of mark where properties get rendered in DOM is because script tags are valid anywhere in the DOM. You can put them inside of ULs or inside of TR tags and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's why script tags.
Yeah. Here, I'll repeat that. I'll repeat it. Keith just said that one of the reasons why using script tags is that it's always valid to have it anywhere in the DOM, so you can just put it anywhere. Any other questions? Oh, yeah? No, it doesn't use underscore. It does use jQuery. Sorry? Yeah, I think also the application is slightly different, right? But yeah, I like this method myself. Any other questions?
If the placeholders all are actually doing the calling of the scripts, for example, you have a number of placeholders in line that basically being called.
Yeah, but if they all have unique IDs.
Yeah, but the place on the page is the order of the calling of the script.
That I don't. Off the top of my head, I don't know. Yes. Yeah. Sometimes it's just nicer to do that. Let me see if there's a good example. One of the things I do in my state chart, sometimes it's just easier to, like, here I want to hide something. Or add a class. I just do that. It's quicker if it's only done once, and having a reference, make that an Ember object or Ember view and all that stuff. Sometimes it's just overkill. You don't need to do it. Any more questions? You had a question?
Sort of.
Or comment?
So I understand that you're saying it relies on jQuery.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you guys, maybe in the future, will kind of bundle in sort of like a jQuery-like view like Angular does, or something like that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
So I don't know what what their roadmap is for the Ember guys. I'm going to be talking to them later, but yeah, I would like to have a lighter weight, framework backing it, because I think jQuery does probably too much.
Right.
So I'm sure that they're going in a direction to make it light. They always want to make it lighter weight. But the other argument that they're having is that jQuery is pretty widely deployed,
Right.
and if you load it from from Google, you generally will have it. So that's kind of the approach that they want to take. If you have jQuery loaded, they should work. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can run this in the mixed environment. It doesn't really, it's not all or nothing, right? the idea is that if you want to have, take some of the benefits of Ember, you can use that, and if you want to do some other custom code, you can do that too. I write, for this app, not only do I use templates, but I also do custom code. So for example, like for this little date picker, like I don't want to write a template for this. So I just write out the HTML and then I drive it via JavaScript. So like this isn't a template. This is just pure JavaScript, so it works. All right. No more questions? All right. All right, thank you.